last party at the demon house. Brandy stood, huddled together with her girlfriends at the back of the old abandoned house, waiting for the boys to find a way in. It was starting to rain, and the distant rumble of thunder set the tone for an evening she had been dreading all year. Her class had been planning to break into the decaying house for their end-of-year party since the start of school. It was something every class had wanted to try, but none had ever attempted. At least not since the class of '76, which ended in mass suicide. The house was built by a small but devout cult back in the early 1800s. Since they were hanged for the murder of 10 young women, the house has sat abandoned, as many believed it to be cursed. A rustling noise came from beyond the door, causing Brandy's heart rate to spike. The doorknob rattled and shook before the door flung outwards, almost knocking the girls off the small porch. Gary stood there in all his muscly jock glory, looking incredibly proud of himself. "Welcome to the fun house," he hollered, pumping a fist in the air. "Let's party." As her friends crowded into the house, Brandy hesitated in the doorway. She couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched, as if the house itself had eyes. Giving herself a shake, she crossed the threshold into the creepy house. It wasn't long before the alcohol started flowing and the music blared through the halls. Brandy hadn't been there for more than an hour when she started to feel uneasy. The music was too loud, the laughter too shrill, and there was something about the way the shadows danced in the corners of the room that made her hair stand on end. She tried to tell herself that she was just being silly, that there was nothing to be afraid of. It was just a stupid old house. But the more she tried to convince herself, the more unnerved she became. Finally, Brandy gave in and decided to put her mind at ease by exploring the house. Finding little of interest on the main level, she ventured into the basement, where she found a secret room hidden behind an old bookshelf. Candles lined the cave-like walls, casting an eerie glow over the giant stone statue of a winged creature that sat in the middle of the giant pentagram carved into the floor. "Ugly bastard," Brandy muttered, running her hand over the statue's hideous, deformed face. A sudden silence engulfed the house as the music abruptly stopped. The shrill screams of her friends that followed echoed all around her in the cavernous room. The candles flickered out and the door slammed shut behind her. Terrified, Brandy found herself pressing up against the cold statue for some semblance of safety. She didn't notice as the statue's large wings enveloped her. Cool breath touched her cheek as a low, gravelly voice came from the darkness. "I'll show you ugliness," it whispered. The Demon of Desire. He sat in the dark listening to music. He was listening to sad love songs. All he wanted was to feel loved, but he felt so alone. As he sat there, a few tears began to creep down his cheek. That was when he swore he heard a whisper. "I'm here for you." He heard a woman's sultry voice say. He looked around and saw he was still alone. "I'm losing my mind from loneliness," the man said to himself. He began to cry, and then he heard it again. "I'm here for you. Don't cry." This time he swore he felt a hand on his shoulder. He continued to cry. It became sobs of grief. "You're not real. It's all in my head." He got out in between his sobbing. He swore he felt a hand on his body now. Suddenly his pants became undone, and he could feel the hand touching him. "I'll make you feel better. Just lay back and relax," the sultry voice said. He did as commanded. He could feel everything, but he never opened his eyes. He was afraid of what he would see. "Look at me," the woman's voice said. "I want you to see me," she continued. He decided he would look. He had to see who or what it was. He opened his eyes and could see this pale and beautiful woman. And as he reached completion, he became tired, very tired. "Sleep, sleep," the woman said as he began to slowly close his eyes. He tried resisting, but he could not. "Sleep and never wake," the pale woman said. "You are mine, now and forever." "Doctor, what happened to this man?" the nurse asked. The doctor was examining the shriveled husk of a man. "Not sure. By all accounts, he was fine the day before," the doctor said. Then a priest walked in. "I'm here to say a prayer for this poor soul," the priest said. "I'm here to give him his last rites," the priest added. The doctor stepped away, and she and the nurse hung their heads in solace. The priest said a short but sincere prayer. The doctor left, and the nurse looked at the priest. "What do you think happened to this man?" the nurse asked. The priest looked at the husk of a man in a coma. "I'd say a demon did this, a demon that comes for men in their dreams." The priest let a single tear fall and began to walk away when he heard a sultry woman's voice say, "I'm here for you."
The Origin of Stoolsibub. Little Timmy and Diane were bored one dark and stormy night. Being that these two were very strange and unusual teenagers, they needed something strange and unusual to do. The ordinary horror movie wasn't going to cut it on this night. They needed something to up the excitement. They were both into dark and macabre things, horror, witches, and witchcraft, demonic entities, the occult, and other things of that nature. So they decided to go on the internet and look up cults and the demons they worship. Two things I'm sure any parent would love to know their child has an interest in. They scrolled past several devil-worshipping cults, then came across a specific demon by the name of Stoolsibub, the demon of shit and other foul excrements. They were mesmerized by the text on the screen. They had no idea that there was a shit demon, but they quickly found out there was, and learned everything about him. In life, his name was Stoolsibub, a Roman centurion who fought in the ranks of Julius Caesar. He was a vicious soldier, known for his brutality on the battlefield. But when he was not fighting in some distant battle, he was back at Rome patrolling the city's walls, or so they thought. You see, what nobody knew about Stoolsibub was that on his nightly patrols, he would stalk and kidnap the city's Vestal virgins, and after he was through with them, he would dismember and throw their mangled body parts into the fecal pits outside of the city walls. After years of Stoolio's spree of murder and a significant decline in the virgin population, he was apprehended one dark and stormy night, disposing of his latest victim. He was found guilty of murdering more than 200 innocent women and was sentenced to be crucified. He was asked on the cross to repent his crimes and ask for forgiveness, but he laughed and bent his head and spat on his confessors. For days he could be heard laughing maniacally, his evil laughter floating through the wind. On his final day breathing his last mortal breath. It is said he managed to free himself from the ropes that tied him to his cross, and he fell to the ground, where he laid in his own excrement that had been collecting for the past several days. There he swore his revenge on the generations of this earthly realm, and swore his allegiance to the Dark Lord below. Once he breathed his final breath, he made his journey to the fiery pits below, where he was given demon status for all of his horrific crimes on earth. He was appointed Stoolsibub, the demon of shit and other unholy excrements, and was given a chance to return to earth if he was ever summoned to exact his revenge. So there he sat, atop his foul-smelling, squishy throne, waiting to be summoned by a foul group of depraved individuals, and luckily for him, there's always a group ready and willing to summon a demon. Timmy and Diane sat there with their eyes wide and jaws dropped as they continued to read and scroll through Stoolsibub's exploits. Up came a list of sightings and cult sacrifices through the years in the name of Stoolsibub. They came across a high society group in 1883 that worshipped Stoolsibub that went by the name the Cult of the Regal Stool. This was the creme de la creme of American society of the time, with members in the group from some of the country's elite families. One dark and stormy night, at Rushington Manor, the country estate of one of their members, they sacrificed 4 of their servants in the name of Stoolsibub. The servants' blood and feces were used to draw a foul-smelling pentagram adorned with 4 brown-lit candles, and in the middle sat, stacked, the 4 lifeless, anus-hollowed bodies of the servants. The last thing that was written in one of the cult members' journal that was later found told of the manifestation of Stoolsibub at the very moment the last brown candle was lit. But no further details were given because the cult members' bodies were also found horribly massacred along with the bodies of their stacked servants. Incident after incident, Timmy and Diane read about, spanning 100 years of foul and funk. A sludgery, brown rain of terror Stoolsibub and his followers had brought down on the innocents of the earth. Hell, there was even a passage stating that during the Christmas season, old Santa chose Stoolsibub as one of his henchmen to delve out punishment to the naughty girls and boys. Stoolsibub had literally been everywhere, like a rough night on the toilet after eating 10 of the meatiest burritos. He's mischievous and deadly. He's why you never trust a fart. He's the explosion you fear when you've taken 2 laxatives early in the morning and are now stuck in traffic trying to get home in time from work. Timmy and Diane were enthralled at this point. Who wouldn't be at this point, am I right? Then they came across an incident that caught both of their eyes. It took place at an old abandoned bus terminal bathroom in 1986, where 2 virgins were sacrificed as well as the cult members. The reason it caught their attention wasn't because of the brutality, but because it was local. It was the old terminal that sat on the outskirts of town the parents warned their children never to go near. Timmy looked at Diane and smiled. "Let's go. We don't have much time anyways, because it said they're going to demolish the building and build a new terminal any day now," he said with a joyous glee. He could see a hesitancy on Diane's face. "Come on, Diane. Don't be a smelly vagine. Let's effing go," he said demandingly. Hey, you bastard, I'm coming. Enough with the name-calling, prick," she answered smugly. They made their way through the storm and arrived at the decrepit old terminal a half hour later,
They entered the once lively building cautiously and made their way to the bathroom. They couldn't believe their eyes when they entered. On the walls were the words still written in now dried blood and feces, and there were still pools of dried blood on the floor next to old burnt-out brown candles. Timmy laughed and sat down his backpack. Out he pulled some fresh candles, sat them on the floor, and pulled a knife out of his back pocket. He quickly turned to Diane and whispered in her ear, "I'm sorry, but I must see him." He then slowly slashed the blade across her throat, and poor Diane bled out. He then drew a pentagram from her blood and bodily brown fluids that just recently expelled. He then smeared the brown juices over the candles and turned them the proper brown festive color that was needed for this ceremony. He sat them down in their proper position and lit them. He then sat Diane's hollowed-out body in the center and summoned his odious master. He stood there covered in blood and shit, waiting and waiting. He started to have doubts. Did I kill my best friend for nothing? He thought. Just then he heard a noise from the pipes and the eerie sound of the wind blowing through the building. It almost reminded him of the Omen movie chanting. Was it him? Timmy thought. Is that his odious tune ushering him back to this earthly surface? The pipes began to creak and expand. A smell Timmy had never smelled before began to fill the room. It brought him to one knee, it was so foul. "Sweet Lord," he exclaimed. "It smells of 1,000 dead sailors covered in octopus shit, or burnt fur burgers covered in a dead man's rancid secret sauce." Just then, all of the bathroom stall doors fell off their hinges onto the floor, and the porcelain thrones began to shudder and shake. Then, like an odious volcano, an eruption the size of if someone OD'd on a bottle of super laxatives shot out of the bowl into the air, plastering the ceiling with fudgy delights. Then the brown lava flowed out and down the bowl, almost like a Mount Vesuvius. It was a Chaka river all over the floor. Then out of the middle toilet rose a brown figure. It was him, the legend of human waste, the ions of functified horror that spewed from his feces-caked pores, could wipe out entire civilizations. As he stepped out of his porcelain throne, he pointed swiftly towards a trembling Timmy, and as he made that motion, a soft chunk of stool broke off and hit Timmy square in the face. Stoolsibub laughed heartily and said, "Don't you ever mention any sweet lords in my presence." Yes, my odious master. Never again, sweet lord of the flies, lord of the chamber pot, master of the unwanted backside disaster," Timmy replied, trembling. "That's a good boy. Now what is it that you want, child? Why did you summon the demon of shit?" Stoolsibub said forcefully. "I wanted to meet you, Sir Funk. Me and my recent living friend just learned everything about you. Your beginnings, your exploits, your marvelous history of stinky debauchery. Your legend has only grown with every freshly harvested stool of a sacrificed virgin, as I just performed on my best friend to summon you, Sir Stench. I want to be your undying servant, my master of shit," Timmy said proudly. "Well, my boy, I'm glad you learned my tale of stenchous woe, but you must not have paid close attention to the stories. Yes, sacrifice your virgins and I will appear, but at the end of the summons, I also take the lives of my followers. I'm sorry, my odious child. Don't tremble. It won't hurt," Stoolsibub said maniacally. "Now get ready, Timmy, for endless Taco Tuesdays, because you're in for a world of..." Shit. The yellow-eyed demon. It felt like someone was watching me. An eerie feeling of being stalked began to fill the air. I could feel a cold chill running down my back and goosebumps racing up my arm. I turned to look over my shoulder and saw a faceless shadow in the corner. I tried to scream, but my breath caught in my chest, and all that came out was a wheezing rasp. My heart pounded through my chest and echoed in my ears. The shadow moved closer, and suddenly I saw two yellow eyes glaring at me before they blinked. My head began to spin, and I pressed my hands against the wall for support. With a jolt, everything went dark. When I opened my eyes, I was face to face with a yellow-eyed demon. My wife is a Karen, but also a literal demon from hell. I held the book in my hands. It contained everything I needed to save her. I understand that after 30 years of marriage, things could get stale and boring, but I would never have predicted my wife becoming what was referred to as a Karen on the internet. There was no place I could go with her. Every restaurant or shop we visited, she had a complaint that just had to be addressed to the manager. Back home, I became the manager. Throw your socks in the laundry basket. Put away the dishes. Sit down when you pee. Life has become hell in the past years. I miss the wife I had married, and I thought that this must be the new standard, the merit of getting older. I almost got used to it. And then things changed. After we came back from a trip to some boring caves in the Slovenian mountainside, one of the few caves containing some rare aquatic salamanders in Europe, she became completely different. It was as if I had been gifted the former self of my wife, in an even improved version. She didn't mind about the socks. She laughed when I was peeing left and right, missing the bowl, and she opened new worlds of fun in the bedroom for me. She had really dug us out of a boring relationship routine. Also, she had dug out a huge hole in our garden. I found her one night just standing there, completely naked and with a shovel in her hand. Of course, I asked her what she was doing, but she just answered that she was looking for the worms. I found it weird, but a hole in the garden was really not a big issue compared to the life I lived in the past years. She kept digging the hole every night, deeper and deeper. Although life had become better with my lovely wife, I was curious. What had happened to her? Was this the menopause or some other mysterious thing happening? I found the answer after deep digging on the internet. I think that she got possessed with some entity back in those caves. The last subtle hint to that conclusion was her singing the name of Satan while chewing on worms one night in her hole. And although I loved this naughty, spicy, outgoing woman, I felt obliged to rid her of this demon, probably an evil succubus, and bring back her true self. She was, after all, my wife. I found a group called Occultism Not Even Once. They sent me this ancient book with a ritual to ban the thing nestling inside of her. Thank God. I thought about her twisted new me one last time, and how she occasionally snuck up behind me and purred into my ear that it was time for bed. I held the book in my hand. It contained everything I needed to save her, and I put it back in the drawer. Demon Shot Game. Have you ever heard of the Demon Shot Game? It's a simple game, really, but not for the faint of heart. So proceed with caution if you want to attempt a session. Let me tell you how it works. So, first off, you'll need some stuff. Nothing fancy here, just regular items that can be found in most households. You will need salt, a pin, vodka, 5 shot glasses, and a regular-sized glass. Last but not least, you'll need some friends. You're not going to trick the demon into playing with you if you are alone. You need precisely 4 friends, 4 friends you really trust. You and your friends should sit in a circle and draw a pentagram using the salt to create the lines. The pentagram should be big enough that it's easy to distinguish which tip of the pentagram is assigned to each of you. Fill the shots with vodka and place one at each tip. In the middle of the pentagram, place the other glass filled with water and a lot of salt. By that, I mean 2/3 water, 1/3 salt. Lastly, each of you should take the pen and use it to add a drop of your blood to your neighbor's shot. I recommend that you play the demon shot only in a private place, shutting off anything that could be a distraction. You'll need all the attention for this. When you are ready, utter these words in unison. Demon, demon, do you dare play a game of demon shot? On us 5, you can hop. After the incantation, take the vodka shot. If a minute goes by and nothing happens, that means the demon rejected the game. Otherwise, this is where the fun begins. The demon will start possessing one of you. During that time, you will literally transcend your own mind. That is what you are playing this game for. It is the most potent drug you'll ever experience. The twist of the game is, the demon can hop between players at any time. You have to communicate with your friends here. Let them know if you are it. It should be clear at all times which one of you is holding the demon, because when the demon finally decides which one will be the chosen one, you have to be ready. When the choice is made, the possession syndromes will worse. Headache, blood dripping from your nose, voices, hallucinations. At that point, you will have but a few seconds to drink the demon shot, the salted water, to expel the demon. Wait too long, and the demon will consume you. Go too fast, it will jump to another player, and you really do not want that. Like I said, not for the faint of heart, but it beats any drug or any of that shit you can inject in your veins, hands down. It's the kind of experience that might just be worth dying for. The demon in the dark. We all know it, the demon in the dark. When you're the last person downstairs, you have to race upstairs to your bedroom after you turn off the lights. If you don't, you're a goner. It's outside as well. When you're walking alone outside, it's out there, waiting in the darkness. When you reach your front door, it's just behind you, breathing close enough to tickle your ear. When you turn around, it's gone, because it's still behind you in the darkness of your house. The moment you turn back towards your house, it's back again. It's behind you when you're inside. It stares in through your windows as you sit on your computer late at night. Its creepy, glowing red eyes watching you, but vanishing once you look its way. I had a friend once who saw the demon. He was running up the stairs trying to reach his room before it got him. Likely it was gaining on him because he reached behind himself and grabbed it, spinning to see its face. He now sits in the middle of a room in a mental hospital, insisting the lights stay on at all times, whispering in a hoarse voice, "It's coming for me. It's coming for me. It's coming for you." He repeats this over and over again, like a mantra. If the light ever goes out for any reason, he screams, screams and screams and screams, raw and piercing. Some doctors got the story out of him and told me, due to me being his best friend. One day, I thought that seeing his face couldn't be too bad. Maybe my friend had seen something else. So one day, I tried to see the demon's face. The demon saw it coming, expecting it even. But I tried every day until one day I turned my head backward slightly, then moved it back immediately, and I stared into its face. Pure red glowing eyes, no white, no black, just glowing red. Elongated teeth, upwards of 8 inches long and filed into points. A fearsome, monstrous body, looking like that of a tall, muscular man, but quickly morphing into an amalgamation of shapes, too terrifying to describe. Its face haunts me. Creepy head, stretched to obscene proportions, an indescribable face wrought anger. I will speak no more of its appearance. Now, I'm sitting in a brightly lit room in the center of my house, with no windows and door, locked from the inside. It can't enter the light. I typed this up on my laptop, prepared to call an ambulance after this. I want to be with my friend, in the middle of that brightly lit room, repeating the mantra. I offer you just one piece of advice. If you want to see its face, restrain yourself. No matter what, don't turn, just run. Once you see the face of the demon in the dark, everything will change. You'll never be the same. Personal demons. I've always loved my home, my safe space, the place I could retreat to escape the outside world. But lately, it feels like the outside world has followed me here. There's darkness lurking, corrupting everything it touches. The once familiar walls now feel like they're closing in on me. I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched, that something is waiting to pounce. I don't feel safe here anymore. I don't feel safe anywhere. The first time I noticed it, I chalked it up to a fluke. I was taking a shower, and I swore I saw a figure in the mirror, a faceless man standing just behind me. I turned around quickly, but there was no one there. I must have been seeing things, I told myself. But then it happened again, and again. I started to notice a figure everywhere, in the mirror, in the windows, even in the shadows of my room at night. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. And not just watched, followed. Wherever I turned, the figure was there, lurking just out of sight. I started to feel like I was going crazy. I told my friends about it, but they just laughed and said I was being paranoid. But I knew something was wrong. I could feel it in the way the hair on the back of my neck stood up on end, or how my heart raced when I was alone in the house. I started to feel like I was a prisoner in my own home. I was jumpy and on edge all the time, afraid to turn my back on any door or window. I started losing sleep, and my work suffered. I was a wreck. Today, I came home from another draining day of work, and the figure stood in the middle of my living room. It spoke to me for the first time. It told me that it was time to give up, that I was weak and pathetic. It was time for me to die. I screamed and ran for the door, but it was too late. It was so fast. It caught me and dragged me back into the house, up the stairs and into the bathroom. I fought with everything I had, but it was of no use. The figure was too strong. I was thrown into the bathtub, forcing my head under the cold water. I don't remember even taking a bath in this house. What a bizarre thought to have as I battled my unknown assailant. Every breath I took filled my lungs with icy water. As I died, I saw the figure's face for the first time. It was my own. Paper Demon. Nancy had just gotten home from work when she checked her mailbox and noticed it was full. Most were just bills, coupons, and spam newsletters. She lost interest midway and threw the bundle on the kitchen table, sending envelopes everywhere. One particular envelope caught her attention. The size and shape were not like the others, and it had no return address on it. Her curiosity had gotten the better of her, and she used a kitchen knife to open the strange envelope and spill out the contents. It contained only a single piece of oxblood red paper. She turned the paper over, scrutinizing each side, looking for a message or writing of any kind. But the paper was blank. She thought it was a prank and was not amused. She huffed as she tossed the piece of paper onto the counter and left the kitchen. The paper landed on the counter and began to fold itself into a 6-inch tall origami demon. It laughed a tiny, mischievous laugh and ran after Nancy. It caught up to her and sank its paper fangs into her ankle. It felt like a paper cut, and she cried out. She kicked it away, causing it to jump off, before cackling impishly, and ran away. Nancy then realized what the letter was about. It was a prank, a revenge prank, but she couldn't understand why anyone would want revenge against someone like her. She thought herself to be better than the average person, and so was incapable of offending others. Sure, she did make mistakes and piss people off from time to time, but they were only minor issues, like the time that she called the police on her neighbor when their baby shower music had been too loud, or when she sprayed her prized hibiscus with chemicals because the neighbor's dog liked playing in them. The chemicals she used had killed the dog, but that wasn't her fault. It was her yard and her flowers, so she could do whatever she wanted. She searched the house for the little demon when she heard a crash coming from the living room. She ran into the room to see it had knocked over her priceless antique vase. It laughed as it ran back into the kitchen. She followed it and saw it throwing food items from the pantry. It was making a big mess on the floor. Nancy snuck up behind it and caught it by the horns. She quickly tore it into pieces before it could bite her again. Satisfied, she swept up the pieces and threw them in the trash. That night, as she slept, she heard tiny, mischievous laughter. Her eyes flew open to see that the torn pieces of paper had folded themselves into a dozen tiny paper demons. They were standing on her bed, holding a kitchen knife in their little paper hands, as if it were a battering ram. Before she could react, they stabbed the knife into her throat. I would like to give a heartfelt thank you to the special friends of the channel. Your generosity means the world to me. If you would like to support the channel, the link is below in the description. Also, please send me your stories to duchessofdarkness27@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram at duchess.ofdarkness or Twitter at duchessofdarkn2. I want to thank you all for your support, your kindness, and your encouragement. I appreciate it so very much. Until next time.